Oregon doesn't think they're done in the transfer portal. Peyton Woodyard is the latest target. That could make sense. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. If you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by our friends at Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. A smattering of transfer portal topics and some NFL draft stuff a little bit later, and then something to note about Oregon men's hoops. Plus baseball. Got a nice win over Oregon State. Top 10, and they went 2-2 in the last 4 games with the Bees. That's not too shabby. But nor is Peyton Woodyard too shabby. So the Alabama transfer is a class of 2024 recruit. And can I just say off the top, I can because, this is my show and I'm the executive producer and the host of it, I guess. It's crazy that a 2024 recruit is in the transfer portal. This is a guy who signed in the early signing window back in December, showed up to Alabama, went through spring ball. Nope, I'm out. This is not for me. This is not the place to be. That's a crazy reality, but Oregon could stand to benefit here because they just lost Cody DeCambra, a 2023 4-star safety. Woodyard is a more highly regarded recruit, but certainly both have solid college traits. I think Woodyard is more highly regarded for a reason, but the reason this could fit at Oregon is because of the positional need. Oregon does not have, especially without DeCambra, a lot of safeties on the roster, and they don't have a ton of depth on the roster. Now, I thought 2024 4-star true freshman Aaron Flowers was awesome in the spring game. I think he was one of the defensive standouts, frankly, certainly amongst the 2024 class, and there's still not a lot of safety depth in there. You've got Tyler Turner, you've got Kobe Savage, Brandon Johnson hasn't shown up yet, but he's a nickel, not strictly speaking a safety that plays over the top. Tysheem Johnson can play over the top. The bottom line is they could add a safety, and they've been tied to Texas A&M's Jacoby Matthews. It is once again all quiet on the Western Front with regards to his transfer portal recruitment, but Woodyard was considering Oregon before choosing Alabama coming out of high school, and he's actually got a crystal ball on 24/7 Sports to choose the Ducks. So that could work. I don't know if he comes in and starts right away. That's the curious thing about this. Like, I don't know if you view this more as a high school recruitment or as a transfer recruitment, because typically when you bring in a guy via the portal, like Kobe Savage from Kansas State, he's got a track record. Second team All Big 12 this past season. And you bring in a guy like Jamari Caldwell, the defensive tackle position, same thing. So this is a unique situation, or it would be. But certainly, if Woodyard is looking for a safety room where he has the opportunity to crack the rotation, Oregon has that available. And I think he'd come in and compete at least for snaps early in his career. And, if a guy were to suffer an injury, he might be number 2 on the depth chart. Now, I don't know where he'd stand versus Aaron Flowers, who, was also a very highly regarded recruit and had a lot of success at the All-American Bowl and looked good in the spring game. So I don't know how all that would shake out, but certainly safety is a position I've talked about for the last couple of weeks as being one where Oregon could add a transfer if they wanted to, and Woodyard is a name to know. A name to not know in the transfer portal right now for the Ducks is Zachary Franklin. So he was at UTSA with Will Stein a couple of years ago, transferred to Ole Miss, only played in 4 games. He's back in the portal, leaving Oxford. I don't think Oregon is a fit for a couple of reasons. Number one, Oregon has plenty of wide receivers, so there's no need from the Ducks side of things, both for this year and next year. The receiver room is as stacked with 4- and 5-star talent as I can ever remember, maybe even more than ever, or at least in recent memory, for Oregon offensively. Junior Adams has done a heck of a job recruiting that position. Zachary Franklin clearly wants to go somewhere. I think he's capable of playing at a Power 4 school, but Ole Miss was not a place where he was able to carve out a big role for himself, and he had a prolific career at UTSA. I think some Oregon fans could, draw the connection between him and Stein. Oh, Oregon could go after him. But I don't think it makes sense on the Oregon side, and I don't think it makes sense on the Zachary Franklin side of things. Because if you're looking for a place to find a more expanded role, going to arguably the best wide receiver room in all of college football, at least one of the top 2 or 3, that's not the place to go. Franklin is a capable player, can be a good player for a Power 4 offense somewhere. Oregon is not the team. That is not the spot to go and get a wide receiver. And, elsewhere around the transfer portal, Oregon's been tied to Derek Harmon, the Michigan State transfer. They, of course, were after him when he first entered the transfer portal back in the winter. He's a defensive lineman, and he's back in the transfer portal. He didn't take a visit to Miami. He was going to, and then he didn't. Make of that whatever you'd like. That's just the latest for guys that Oregon's going after, but it feels like Oregon's going to add at least one more player in the transfer portal, and they can make the scholarship stuff work, as I'll get to in just a moment. Collin Gill, by the way, has left the secondary room. He's entered the portal, was a 3-star guy in the class of 2023, and was trying to fight his way up the depth chart. And there just was clearly not a path. And this is not surprising. I've talked for a while about how there would be a member of the secondary probably leaving, and it ends up being Collin Gill. Makes sense. There are just a lot of names, especially with Nico Reed staying around, not following Demetrius Martin to Michigan State. I think that makes, plenty of sense from Gill's standpoint. He's a plenty talented kid, could certainly find more playing time elsewhere. And this Oregon secondary at the cornerback room specifically, you're just going to struggle to find snaps. You're going to struggle to see the field because there are so many names, and you got returners like Jalil Florence and newcomers like Jabbar Muhammad, Cam Alexander, Sione Laulea, all these guys. There's just a lot of competition in that room, and I think it's a good problem to have. I think when a guy who could certainly have starting caliber potential in Collin Gill leaves, it's demonstrating that position group has got a lot of guys that are ready to play or have proven that they can play. Nico Reed, of course, in that mix as well. This led to a couple of different questions that came in via the flock over at Subtext regarding NIL and scholarships, because the football team is awarded 85 scholarships they can give out to players. But what if they're over that limit? What if guys, come in and there isn't a scholarship available? And the questions that I get asked are, can an NIL collective be a part of giving a kid enough money to essentially have him de facto on scholarship in that he's not paying for his school, for his classes and whatnot? The answer to that question is yes. So the NIL collectives, Oregon's is Division Street, they are separate entities, as in they're not directly affiliated with the university. They are allowed to do some coordination. That takes place, and that has been ruled in the courts, with the NCAA fighting these lawsuits all over the place and losing most of them. The Tennessee ruling, I think, had an aspect to it in which they determined, NIL collectives can be, a part of a high school player's recruitment to a university, and certainly with regards to the portal or guys coming in, that's true as well. I know that this happens at a smaller level with other sports and at smaller schools. I can only imagine. I don't have firsthand knowledge, but I know that it happens at smaller schools. I have to imagine it can happen with Oregon as well. So, the 85 scholarship limit, I don't know where the exact scholarship count is at, but if Oregon goes over, and they still want to bring in a transfer kid, they could very easily go to the collective and say, hey, can you pony up whatever I actually don't know the tuition at the University of Oregon right now, but can you pony up whatever that is so that this kid can go to school for free, and then next year we can put him on scholarship when we have certain seniors graduate. That is 100% an option that's available. So I think with regards to adding a guy like Peyton Woodyard or even Zachary Franklin, but more likely, as I mentioned, a Derek Harmon from Michigan State, the scholarship numbers, people get worked up about it. I understand it, but coaches are aware of it. There are teams of people to monitor this sort of stuff. Everybody's involved, and it'll all definitely work out. A lot of Ducks found homes in the 2024 NFL Draft, which reflects well on Oregon's talent building and recruiting over the last couple of years. 8 guys drafted, a program record. Could Oregon beat that one day? You know what you can't beat for all your gambling needs and wants? FanDuel, of course. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. You can also bet college football over there. You can bet things pertaining to Oregon, Big Ten championship odds, national championship odds. Their win total's 10.5, tied for the largest in all of college football. It's all available to you over there. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and our official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. I am a tea drinker. Not just tonight, but basically every day. So, time for some mailbag questions. YouTube comments or X, formerly known as Twitter, at @McLaughlinCFB or at Locked On Ducks. Those be the handles. If you want priority access and all sorts of other perks, go join the flock over at Subtext. Link in the description below wherever you listen to or watch this show. This from Robert. For Locked On Ducks, that be this show, would like to know if you think the Ducks could have 10 players drafted next year. Well, Oregon just set a record this year, and I think 10 could be within reach one day. Next year specifically, that's difficult, but I think the NFL draft is a really good barometer for understanding two aspects that relate to Oregon's on-field success. Number one, the caliber of players that you're bringing in. If you look at the teams that led the NFL draft this year in number of players selected, you know who was near the top? Michigan and Washington. You know who else was up there? Texas was up there. It turns out that the more NFL talent you have on your roster, better chance you have to compete for a national championship. So I think Oregon getting 8 players drafted is a testament to the caliber of players that are being brought in and also how they are being developed. Just because you bring in someone who's supremely talented does not automatically mean that guy's going straight to the NFL. I look at Kayvon Thibodeau, for instance, highest rated recruit in the history of Oregon football, #1 overall player in the country. The guy underwent legitimate, serious, tangible development over his time with the Ducks to be the 5 pick in the draft to the New York Giants, and he's really good. But he progressed tremendously, and that's an element of coaching that's really important. So I think that Lanning is proving early in his career that he and his staff have those sorts of capabilities. I mean, you've got guys getting drafted here, some of which were on the roster already when Lanning and company arrived, like Jackson Powers Johnson or Troy Franklin. Jamal Hill was the 8th and final draft selection, and then more guys found undrafted free agent contracts, like Stephen Jones got one, and there were a couple others as well. But the 8 draft selections, I think, is an outstanding number. I don't think Oregon gets to 10 draft selections next year, but in future years, yeah, I could see it because you bring in guys like Jabbar Muhammad every year, Christian Gonzalez, that might be one and done at a given position, but those are guys that are high-level players, all conference caliber dudes that are going to work their way up draft boards. And so 8 players selected this year. The reason I don't see 10 next year is you just go through the list of guys that you know are going to get drafted, and let's start and presume that all these guys declare. Some are or most are out of eligibility after the season anyway. But Evan Stewart, that guy's getting drafted. Terrence Ferguson, that guy's getting drafted. Johnny Cornelius, Josh Connerly, both getting drafted. I don't know if Connerly goes out after this year. That's not a guarantee. Certainly he could. He's had the NFL, I think, kind of monitoring him since he came out of high school. He's the #1 offensive tackle in his class. I think Jeffrey Bassa gets drafted with the way his career has progressed. Jabbar Muhammad, that is 6. Jordan James, that's 7. If James were to go out after this year, he could have another season if he wanted to. He's going into his junior campaign. It'll probably be the most productive year he's had as a running back with the Ducks this season. That's 8 guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry, that's 7 guys that I say no questions asked. These dudes are getting drafted. Then you go into, well, if Dylan Gabriel is a great year, would he get drafted? Don't think the NFL is going to love a guy that's as small as Dylan Gabriel. And the same goes for Tez Johnson. These are high-end, all-conference caliber college players. does not mean they get drafted in the NFL. Frankly, if I had to handicap it right now, I'd say Tez Johnson has a better chance of making himself into an NFL draft pick than Dylan Gabriel does. The quarterback is just a more stringent position, and Johnson is very small, but he's very fast, and his routes are really, really good, and he's got great hands. And, I look at a guy like Hunter Renfrow and say, I don't know all the things that Renfrow has that Tez Johnson necessarily doesn't. I think Renfro's a little bit bigger, and certainly plenty of scouts would be scared off by what it would look like when Tez Johnson gets hit in the NFL over and over. But I've watched Tyler Lockett as a Seahawks fan personally. I've watched Tyler Lockett make a bunch of plays as a small guy and just avoid getting hit his entire career. The guy catches the ball, he runs a great route, catches the ball, and then he just goes down. He just goes down. There was a hilarious compilation of it last year. Tyler Lockett doing everything he can to avoid getting hit. Like that could work. So maybe that works. But at that point, I didn't put Jordan Burch in here. He could certainly get drafted. That would be 8. That'd be 8 guys that I feel pretty solid about being drafted. The other 2, I don't know, feel like they'd get undrafted free agent opportunities, but not necessarily locks to be NFL draft picks. So, when you throw Burch in there, yeah, it's possible. I just don't know. That's a lot. Maybe Jamari Caldwell puts his name into the mix. I don't know how he's seen in the drafting community, so they could push for it, but that's a high standard. I think there were only a couple teams this year that had double-digit players selected, and I don't doubt Oregon's ability to do that one day. Is next year the class? Maybe, but all those guys would have to go out, and all those guys would have to get drafted. I don't know if they all would. But interesting question, though, and keeping on the NFL thread here. So John sent in a question, wanted my thoughts on Mel Kiper's comments on Bo Nix. And Mel Kiper wrote the following. By the way, I don't hold anything against Mel Kiper. I've met him before. He's a really nice guy. Quote, "That's way too high for Nix, who put up massive numbers at Oregon but played in an offense in which he wasn't asked to go through read progressions." End quote. So Mel Kiper Jr. has been doing this for a very long time. Far be it from me to think of myself as above him. I think I can say I watched more of Bo Nix last year than he did because he's covering the entire country for the NFL draft scouting community and ESPN. And I was covering Oregon for all of you, obviously. So I'd say I've watched more Bo Nix at Oregon than Mel Kiper has. He does have a point. I just don't think the entire context is there. The point that is correct and is actually, I think, a really positive strength for Bo Nix as he goes to the NFL is that last year he read a defense, ID'd the coverage quickly, understood the play, got the ball out of his hands quickly. That happened a lot. And there were also some design plays or design throws where, you only have a certain number of options that you have to go through. That's 100% true. That doesn't mean Bo Nix doesn't have good throws that he has put on tape in which he is going through his progressions. Does he have to do it more in the NFL? Probably. You're going against better defenses, guys who are bigger, faster, stronger in that sense. But I think that for Bo Nix going into the NFL, he's not going to be able to dissect a defense, at least not early in his career. He's a very cerebral, very smart guy. We all know that. To get to that level in the NFL, there's a jump. There's a learning curve. There's an adjustment. Disguises are different. Play calls are different. Players are bigger, faster, stronger than what you were dealing with in college. And, your timing has to be that much more precise. And Bo Nix has a good arm. He doesn't have an elite arm, but neither does Trevor Lawrence. I've heard Greg Cosell talk about that for many years, that Lawrence has a good arm. It's good enough to be in the NFL, just like Bo. Both were 5-star recruits, but neither one has, a Josh Allen, Mahomes, Justin Herbert sort of arm. So I think that for Bo Nix, that's going to be a challenge for him, and I think that's a fair point to bring up from Kiper's standpoint. I just wish he had also included that, that's not an inherently, it's not all bad. Like him getting the ball out of his hand quickly was also a product of, this is one of the most cerebral quarterbacks that that we've got coming out in this cycle. He's not ad-libbing and, doing things on the run all the time like Jaden Daniels. He's looking at defense and going, okay, hey, the ball needs to go here. That's where, and then put it out on time and on target. But Kiper's also got plenty of good things to say. Like John, I know you were a little frustrated, at least the tone of the comment was frustration or being upset with Mel Kiper Jr. I don't think he dislikes Bo Nix. He compared him to Drew Brees and said he thinks that Sean Payton, before the draft, will see a lot of Drew Brees in Bo Nix. And I think that's what Bo Nix can be at his very best, is a guy that, can push it down the field, does it from time to time, but certainly is most effective when he's operating from 15 yards from the line of scrimmage and he's just executing the offense and serving as a point guard back there for Sean Payton. So I think that mix is perfect. Talked about that before the draft, and I think that he can succeed, and he's got this guy to throw to on the outside. His name's Troy Franklin. He's pretty familiar with him. So I think it'll be very, very fun. I think Oregon men's basketball is going to be awesome. The more I think about it, and the more one of you thought about it, it made me think about it a little more. I'm just getting excited for hoops next year. And I'm always excited about Monopoly Go. Game off. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in the game. Everybody, you can team up with friends for time tournaments in Monopoly Go where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. Plus, Monopoly Go just always feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. It's not the same old, a ton. Include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure, robot pachinko. There's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. There's always something there. So get off the bench, go download it now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. I always love knowing that you all are paying attention. I mean, fundamentally, I hope that you're all just, listening or watching and enjoying the show. But I also love when you are all paying attention, being the most informed fans you can possibly be. And one of you, I should have pulled up the name because you know what? One moment. Dylan, good sir. I appreciate it. I made an omission yesterday on the show, and that was just not a Freudian slip. That's not the right term, but just a slip of the mind, an error, what my old history and government professor or teacher in high school, Mr. Noble, would call a moment of cerebral flatulence, brain fart, essentially. I forgot that Oregon added Brandon Angel. Literally, I've talked about him on the show before. I like what he brings to the Ducks. And yesterday, when I was talking through what a projected lineup would look like, now that Raheem Moss has been added from Toledo, who's a first-team All-Guy, I'll get to him a little bit more in just a sec, I forgot that Brandon Angel has come over from Stanford for his final year of eligibility. And when I had that pointed out to me, I had two thoughts. Number one, Spencer, you dummy. How could you possibly forget that? Number two, holy crap, this team is loaded. The amount of talent on this team is crazy. And I still have not heard, and there hasn't been any buzz about N'Faly Dante getting a 6th year of eligibility. And look, if he gets that, Oregon should be one of the favorites in the Big Ten. The roster is absolutely that stacked. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You would have so much depth, size, athleticism, shooting. Everything would be there. It would all be there with a sophomore point guard who I think we all really like and a great guy in Keyshawn Bartholomew backing him up. Oh, man, it'd be incredible if Dante's back. But even if Dante isn't back, let's say the NCAA says, no, sorry, your college career is unfortunately over, which would be it's a bummer because that's a tough way for a guy who's had a heck of a career and has been a Duck through and through and battled through injuries so many times over and over and just kept pushing. And here he was having the 2-week stretch of his career, couldn't hit a free throw, go to overtime, and then Oregon runs out of gas. That would stink, But let's say that comes to pass. Even without Dante, this Oregon lineup is absolutely loaded. And I'm starting the hype train right now in the month of May because they deserve it. And I talked when the season ended about how the Ducks making a run to the tournament through the Pac-12 tournament, beating South Carolina, almost beating Creighton. I felt like it captured and created momentum that the program didn't have. It felt like it was trending in the opposite direction. Not that Dana Altman still couldn't coach, but it felt like, a third straight year missing the tournament, that's a much different feel than a team that was that close to the Sweet 16. And I think Dana Altman bringing in Tony Stubblefield, who was formerly the head coach at DePaul, which is a tough place to be, I think that has kind of kickstarted some momentum in the transfer portal world. And they've brought in a couple of guys who are really highly coveted transfers and are going to be really good players with the Ducks. If Dante's back, gosh, be one of the most stacked Oregon basketball rosters in recent memory. Even if he isn't back, though, this is still a loaded lineup because you have Shellstat at the point. Raheem Moss is going to start at the 2. You're probably looking at some combination of Brandon Angel, KJ Evans, Nate Biddle, Bam Tracy as your forwards. I mean, that's something I think Dana will probably tinker around with a lot in the early portion of the season. Certainly they have to manage Biddle's minutes to try to keep him healthy and on the court. But when he's there, that is a high impact player. But when you have those guys, like you have 6 to 7 starting caliber players, right? Shellstad, we know. Moss, we know. We've seen Bam Tracy start on the team that just went to the round of 32. KJ Evans, Nate Biddle when healthy, Brandon Angel. And we don't really know what Mookie Cook is, the former 5-star freshman. So it's hard to know if he's a starting caliber player. Certainly his high school film would indicate yes, but those 6 guys plus Keyshawn Barthélemy can start places. And I think Barthélemy is the perfect 6-man off the bench. He is my ideal 6-man. Come in and score. Shoot, 3-level score, finish at the rim, mid-range, just come in and score. He's awesome. So really glad he's back and hope he's healthy. But if you have a lineup of guys where Angel has had outstanding seasons at Stanford, Moss is off a first-team All-MAC selection this past year, you bring back your 2 5-stars who were starters on your team a year ago. How much more talent, how much more excited can you get as an Oregon fan looking at the way they've been working? And it's been fantastic. And it took a little while. Admittedly, it took a little while. And it's been worth the wait. Like I am on the hype train here. This could be a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament, with or without N'Faly Dante. And I wanted to do a little bit more digging on Raheem Moss, and I'll get to a question about him in just a second. But I reached out to a coach I know who has actually coached against him in the Mid-American Conference last year. Scouting report goes like this, quote, attacking guard, good vision, I'll get to that more in just a second, rebounds well for a perimeter, knack for the ball, not a great shooter, but can make shots with his feet set, physical player, plays with an edge. Jermaine Couisnard, you have been reincarnated, at least in the best possible fashion for the Ducks here. Now, he's probably at the Power 5 level closer to a 10-point-a-game scorer than a 15-point-a-game scorer, which is what he was this past year with the Rockets. But still, when you look at the depth of scoring and talent Oregon has, I think that's okay. I think that is okay. And one quick thing before I move on here, Cliff Amori is the Rutgers transfer center who I've talked about before on the show, could have been a target. Don't think Oregon's going to go after him. I think they're either going to welcome N'Faly Dante back as a boost that they're not expecting yet, or they might be done in the portal. So we'll kind of see how that plays out. But remember, you can enter the portal during a certain window. This applies for all sports. You can exit at any time. So you never know how that could go. But a comment came in about Moss saying this. This is my take after watching the App State game. His ceiling is high, but on offense, he went to the corner like a wing and stood there. Other times, he got into the rotation, but was in the corner way too much. Off ball, his demeanor was interesting. He showed high energy, while other times his energy was lacking. He turned the ball over way too much. After saying that, I felt he was most talented player on the court. Hopefully, Dana can fine-tune his game. So, I wouldn't look too heavily into what his role was at Toledo for, a given stretch in a game. And that game, interestingly enough, in its full capacity, is available to watch on YouTube. So I watched a couple media timeouts. I think that his court vision and playmaking is outstanding. I mean, his float game is remarkable, but his ability to see the floor and pass when he drives is Couisnard-esque. And this is a guy who averaged 3 assists a game last year. I don't think he'll be a 15-point-a-game scorer for the Ducks. I think he'll be an 11 and 12-point-a-game guy, and he'll rebound the ball well, and I think he can facilitate too. So I am really, really high on this addition. I don't know if he's got the high-end production that Couisnard had this past year in terms of his overall scoring output, but Oregon doesn't need that. I expect Shellstad and Evans to take jumps. Brandon Angel can score. Nate Biddle can score. I just look at what Oregon's got here. Depth, talent, athleticism, size, shooting. It's all there. It's all there. And if Dante comes back, holy smokes, it'll literally be too talented of a team. Like, someone could transfer out if Dante comes back or decide not to come to. Like, Angel could decide, no, I don't know if Oregon's a spot for me with N'Faly Dante there. But we'll wait and see what happens here. But I absolutely love where this roster is at. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, go Ducks.